Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Sorting Hat Podcast, a show where everything and anything can and will be sorted. This is part 2, so we're just going to forego...
I'd say chapter 2.
Oh, damn it, Reed. It's Michael, it's Reed, it's Galen. We're back. We're in...
More English lit, baby.
Yeah, we're in junior and senior year now.
Oh,
yes,
man.
we are.
Best time of our lives.
So, Galen, what do you have for us?
Okay, so as soon as we finished talking last time, and where I waxed so poetic about sophomore year, I took a look at junior year, and no, I think junior year had all the best books.
Oh, okay. We're hyping it up. Should we just dive on in?
Sophomore year can suck it. Junior year is where it's at.
That's how I felt in actual high school at the time, too, I think, by the way.
Junior year was so hard, but so fun.
Going off of the pod, I also was like reflecting back, and I was like, freshman year, didn't really care for. Sophomore year, I remembered like a handful of other books that my weird English teacher made us read. Like we read 100 Years of Solitude, which is like not normally in the like...
No, I don't think it would be.
That was like summer reading for senior year for me.
Yeah,
but it was definitely an optional one.
Right. This was mandatory. Like we read like concurrent books.
Meanwhile, in my senior year of high school, they figured out I was bored and not stupid, and they moved me halfway through senior year into the gifted English department. That's how, and I'm like, y'all thought I was slow. I did, even in those classes, like the funding was so bad, and like so the department and the whole what is it called, district, so apathetic that the gifted students were reading things like what is his name, Weisel's Night and stuff like that, and that was considered Weisel, thank you. And that was considered like the elevated literature, and like reading Vonnegut, like any Vonnegut, was considered like the smart kid shit. And I was like, Jesus Christ, I got to get out of here.
I think I read Elie Wiesel in freshman, but sophomore was like the oddball year for me, and then junior year, that was the first. That was like I had I might have talked about this on the pod. I had 2 English teachers that year. The first half of the year, a very good teacher for writing. Like he was like, here we go, throwing down Strunk and White, elements of style. Y'all are gonna like learn how to be as like concise and dense with your writing. And in that regard, he was a fantastic teacher. As a person, however, he was a piece of shit.
Yeah, that often comes along with being really good.
And he subsequently was fired, although he did not put it as such, based on some of his more racist tendencies.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
And so what about you, Galen? What was high school like for you around that time?
Junior year, my lit class that year was really kind of interesting because we had I had a teacher that was, I mean, every single language arts teacher in the state of Georgia is like an older Southern white woman. Like that's just how it is. There was like 2 male lit and language arts teachers at my school, but I had Mrs. Atwell junior year, and God bless her, she
We're
just
naming
had
names.
She had a class
no items.
of kids that were like, just, man, we thought we knew absolutely everything, and we would get into like giant debates with her where like bless that woman, she put up with us. And it wasn't until much later that I was looking back. We got in like a huge fight with her at one point, the entire class, because we were like reading a poem and interpreting a poem, and we were interpreting it wrong. And she was like, that's not what this poem is about. And we were like, all poetry is up for interpretation. And she was like, it is absoltabsolutely not. Sometimes a poem is about something. And we like,
oh gosh, I can only imagine putting up with me. I'm already a lot now, and this is me like having settled down in my old age.
Yeah, I think a lot of people, when they first are like introduced to art, are thinking that, I mean, in some cases, they're assuming that all things are abstraction. So it's like, oh, I can look at this thing and it's a Kandinsky or a Rothko, and it means whatever I want it to. Like, if I feel that way, who's to say? And it's like, no, some things are written very purposefully to evoke certain emotions. And if
sometimes
you don't feel
something's
that,
about something.
yeah,
I'm endlessly fascinated by death of the author phenomenon, like that sort of thing. And on a more personal note, like I always find it interesting to know like why people make certain choices the way they do. Like, what were you like just on a personal level around this time in high school, Galen?
Oh man, musical theater girl to the max. That this junior year was like for me, high school is all broken down into like what show was I working on every semester.
It's really easy like touchstones if everything else is fuzzy.
Yeah, because it would just take over. It took over my life for every semester. The musical was the big event in my life for 4 months as we're getting ready for it.
What was the one around this time?
So junior year, the fall was Into the Woods.
Oh,
I was the witch. It was great. We took it to one act competition. We went to state. It was wonderful.
Oh, yeah. Work state. Yes.
And then second semester was Anything Goes. And I was in the ensemble for that. So I had like a chiller time second semester.
I would never get in a show like that.
Yeah,
I can't dance.
I was definitely like, well, I mean, all throughout school, like my friends called me Hermione because I was such a know-it-all. But like not like quiet about it. My
favorite kind of woman is smart and not quiet about it.
Yeah, I was intent on making sure everybody around me knew that I knew all the right answers. And that persists to this day.
What's your zodiac sign?
Oh, Capricorn.
Of course it is. Yes.
Very much.
I stand a Capricorn queen all the time.
Oh my God, you're weird. Like, okay, leaning in to 2019, Reed has become overly invested in this bit of astrology.
Like 5 question marks.
The quotes around it are question marks.
Michael hates it so much that I have it's making me just want to believe in it
Before
more.
we started the pod, there was a very brief conversation, me talking about dating sites and things like that, and Reed was like, "Well, just let me know like about your astrological sign, so I can
If you want me to know who you're fated to." If you want me to just figure that out for you, I can do that for you. But if you don't want to meet your soulmate, that's also fine.
I'm a Virgo. Go.
Of course you're going to be like this then. I got to let you do it in your own time. It's fine.
You'll come around.
That's BS. No, I'm throwing it down right now, Reed. You bring me my soulmate.
I'm going to get some academic journals from him later. We should just start sorting things before he fist fights me.
Yeah, let's dive into junior year. But the end of my little brief story was the first half was this very rigid guy, and the second half was this very hippy dippy, flowy, anything goes, whatever you want to believe is correct. And so the writing diametrically opposed pieces. I wrote a piece about how Tom Joad, the essay prompt was, is Tom Joad a basketball, a hamburger, a penguin, or what was it? Or a bicycle? Cite your sources.
What?
What'd you decide he was?
That dude rules. I want his contact info.
I
would definitely do the exact same thing as a teacher. I just fuck with my students constantly.
I got that prompt and was like, what is this shit?
For my AP test, it was fated for me to be transferred in that late in that class because our test essay ended up being based on the Onion. It was the Onion article, and then you had to write.
What?
You had to be able to write rhetorically around it, and all of the rest of my peers who had been just fucking on that AP track for so long were saying wait, I also need to be able to interpret satire. Oh no!
Oh my god!
And my nerd ass who had been watching Bill Murray films on loop until people realized I was smart was like, let's do this, baby. I was one of 2 people who got a 5 on the test.
That's amazing.
Out of 5, right?
Yeah, out of 100.
out of 100.
Okay, so let's dive into junior year. What's the book?
Well, you already brought it up, so let's go ahead and bring up the
Grapes of Wrath?
the seminal junior year book, Grapes of Wrath.
All right.
Yeah. Okay. So
I don't know why I reacted that way to the Grapes of Wrath.
Them grapes.
Hell yeah.
Grapes of Wrath.
Grapes are so angry.
Dust Bowl.
Grapes of Wrath is a real split one for me.
Yeah. This is Steinbeck? Is that?
Yeah.
Yes, I'm back.
Basically, what's the rundown on this one? Like the
It
plot?
is the Depression and the Jodes have been in Oklahoma, right? It starts in Oklahoma?
Yeah,
I think it starts in Oklahoma.
They're in the middle of the country
Dust
where
Bowl.
the crops are a dying, and so they're
So-
heading west.
So they're going west. They're going to California because you go out there, and as all the brochures they've been handed tell them, there is plenty of work, and it's going to be gorgeous, and there's plenty of money and work to go around. And so you're like, great, this book is going to be about them getting to California and the hardships along the way. And once they get to California, everything's fine. No! Once they get to California, everything's terrible because everybody came to California and the workers have no rights and there's not enough jobs and there's not enough pay. So people are still starving to death. People still don't have any, people still can't take care of themselves or their families.
But it's a little less dusty.
It's a little less
This is one of
dusty.
those.
And in my memory, it's like every other chapter or every third chapter of the book is like an allegory. And I think the most famous one is chapter 3, which is about a turtle crossing the road.
Yeah, that's the one. That's the one that sticks out in my mind.
Yeah.
There's that one and the tractor one. And I feel like I need to reread this book now because it had the effect on me then that reading Moby Dick of my own volition had on me at that time, which was because you've read Moby Dick, yes?
I actually have not read Moby Dick,
But you are familiar with the construction of Moby Dick. So Moby Dick is every other chapter is narrative, and then like let's talk about the anatomy of a ship or the like the digestive system of a whale.
And that might have been sort of obfuscated, like the point as a younger person.
I mean, to me, Melville is so dry in his descriptors of how a ship operates. You don't think
Melville's an easy read?
The actual narrative stuff I thought was pretty engaging.
Yeah.
But in this, and similarly with Steinbeck, anytime we were dealing, or no, I think in this case I was flipped. I didn't give a shit about the Jodes. And I really liked the metaphor chapters.
Oh, that's really interesting.
Or like the
that is like
pieces.
that's like very opposite, I think, from most people.
I think it was just because every time we'd come back, it was like, and things are still bad. Like,
it definitely becomes like I don't know. I want to say only also that this book, a lot of the themes and context hits very close to home for me in terms of like living through poverty and like also a lot of the religious ties to it. But still saying that, do you feel like part of it is maybe like sympathy fatigue? At a certain point, you're like, oh my God, these poor people. I can't read this anymore.
Yeah, it is hard to read. I remember reading this one, and it was the first Steinbeck I'd ever read. And, you know, it was required. And this was one of the few books that I like really struggled through. It was a really tough read for me. And then the next year, my senior year, my history teacher, Mr. Barry, the dopest teacher I ever had, he was like giving extra credit if you would read East of Eden. So I read East of Eden and was like, oh, geez, okay, well, what's this going to be like? I dove into that, and I was halfway through that book and was like, oh, shit, I think Steinbeck is my favorite writer ever. And
does that claim still hold?
Yeah, Steinbeck is still probably my favorite American novelist. I love Steinbeck, but it took me reading something else. And I think, too, you know, the allegory chapters, because for me, I was into the story of the Jodes. And so these chapters that would break and go into the allegory really frustrated me because I just was like, oh, I want to know what's happening. I want to keep going. I want to keep moving through the story. And I reread Grapes of Wrath probably 7 or 8 years ago and was kind of like shocked that I hadn't liked it the first time I read it. I revisited it and was like, God dang, what was wrong with you? Were you just like that busy that you couldn't devote the mental energy to this book? Because now I love it. But when I first read it, I had a really hard time with it.
I feel like the American education system, and I know that this is always, I'm eternally sounding like a giant commie. I think we just don't realistically educate about what class is like. And we just give these little glimpses into it, you know, where it cannot be otherwise ignored because of how masterful the work is, like the Grapes of Wrath. But even then, we don't contextualize it in a way that is easy. So it can be overwhelming, I think, when you're young. And like, I think just in a compartmentalization sort of way, I think you
maybe
reject it.
That was what was, for me, a little tough, was both that it was just depressing to be existing in the depression forever, but also having the inability to sort of empathize as properly as I think it's expected.
Poverty and lower class in terms of like, we should always imagine everyone has the ability to mobilize upwardly with ease across the board, like, you know, because we want to say that we live in a fair and free union, but it gets
the way, just as you were saying that, there's so much like your tongue was coated just with I could.
Well, I'm not trying to politicize this poor woman's subject too much.
I get it.
Yeah, I literally think children sometimes aren't given the right words even to talk about it, and so how can they even process it themselves?
Yeah.
It's good, however, that the system is instructing and introducing the concept, but it isn't going to be, I think, upon further reflection, like kind of what we're doing right now, but, you know, to a slightly more silly bent, like recognizing, oh yeah, we were dumb back then, like, and being willing and interested in re-examining sort of these things.
No, I feel like I should probably go back and reread almost everything that I tried to read the first time, now realizing how little context I had about the larger world.
Yeah. As far as sorting this one goes, I'm kind of two minds about it, because the emphasis, because to me, the story and the story about, you know, the struggle of people to find and or create a fair and just world where everybody has a place, to me feels very Hufflepuff.
Yeah.
I agree with that sentiment.
I feel like the structure of the book and the way that the book approaches the material is a little more Ravenclaw-y, because so many people have such a hard time with it. I remember the whole time I was reading this book, and even before I started it, when like my dad found out it was on my list for the year, like my dad just complaining about Grapes of Wrath and how much he hated it and how hard it was for him to get into.
I feel strongly that it's a Hufflepuff. Just on the both the sort of class struggle element and the toil that is like inherently hardy.
Is like, I remember so many vivid images of like domestic life and also the yearning for it.
The family component is the big thing for me, because it's all about this collective family unit, like trying to make it for the betterment of all of them.
It's an idealism. Yeah, so I totally, I do see what you mean as far as like, you can see Steinbeck desperately wanting to make this as accessible as possible. I think that's where the allegory sort of system framework works in, right? So,
yeah.
I'm also torn, but we don't have to land anywhere specifically.
I think leaning into the Hufflepuff of it, I think that's probably the right call. Especially, too, when I think about the way it ends, how it ends with, spoiler alert.
If you don't know how the Dust Bowl ended.
Rose of Sharon loses her baby. She's been pregnant the entire book, and she loses her baby and ends up using her milk, because her milk has come in, and she uses her milk to feed a starving man, which is, I think, in terms of like
Bonkers.
imagery.
I forgot that happened, by the way.
Yeah. Grapes of Wrath is like, woof. It's a
like if that happened on a prestige TV show today, people would lose their minds.
It's a twisted tale. So let's shift away from these grapes and move on to
Great Gatsby.
Great Gatsby. Yeah.
All right, here we go.
I mean, junior year was all about the Americana sort of.
And also, like, I can see Gatsby being prescient around that time, just because we're really in our full blown first identity crisis by that point, and oh no, I'm about to be a fully formed adult, we think.
Yeah, so I think everybody is pretty familiar with Great Gatsby, but giving us
I've never read a book. What is this about?
Yes.
So, man, what's the narrator's name? Tom?
Nick.
Nick, yes, Nick. Okay, so Nick moves
Calloway,
to,
I believe.
Yeah, I think so. He moves to, is it Long Island? Where are they? I don't remember.
Well, they're like on West Egg.
Ah, yes, that's right. We're in New York State, somewheres. And Nick moves to West Egg and meets his neighbor, Jay Gatsby, who throws a big party every single night at his mansion because Jay Gatsby is very rich. But Jay Gatsby is only throwing these parties so that his ex-girlfriend, ex-fiancée, Daisy, will show up. And Daisy finally shows up, and it does not go well.
Oh, no.
Daisy's married to
Tom.
Tom, that's who Tom is. Daisy's married to Tom Buchanan, and Tom's a real asshole, but Daisy's also a real asshole. Jay Gatsby's a real asshole. Jordan
and Nick just watches the whole thing.
Jordan's also kind of an asshole. Everybody's an asshole.
Everyone's an asshole. This is like The Hills, but in the 20s.
Yeah. And everybody's having affairs. Tom's having an affair, and Daisy and Gatsby have an affair.
And
Daisy
Nick
hits
is in
Myrtle
love
with
Gatsby,
car.
right?
It's a mess.
My reading was always on it that they had some sort of sexual tension between them.
Between Nick
that
and
who did?
Gatsby?
Yeah.
Oh.
I mean, granted, when we read it, I was so
a teenager.
Well, no. I had trouble just connecting to any of these characters.
Same.
So I don't recall us ever discussing that. I just remember at the point that Daisy says, "What do people plan?" I said, "Fuck these people." I remember that quote from her very specifically. She's laying languishly spread across a couch, and it just we should plan something. What do people plan? Fuck this. Fuck that.
My main image of this book, besides the billboard with the eye on it, which is, usually on the cover of most editions of this book, but my main image from this book is Gatsby pulling the shirts out of his closet and throwing the shirts in the air and throwing the shirts on the bed, and Daisy swimming around on the bed like she's swimming around in a swimming pool of cash, but it's gorgeous shirts.
Delighting in cloth all around her.
They have fun.
Yeah.
What do people plan?
You know what is wild to me is this book and its intent about its examination of conspicuous consumption and stuff. It gets completely read at face value by a lot of people, so you end up having people throwing Great Gatsby parties and really leaning into how shitty these characters are. The same way that people love that Tub Thumpin' song, even though it's making fun of bar culture. And then that band, and then Chumbawamba has to, for the rest of the time, be that's not what we meant.
It's like The Devil Wears Prada. When people start learning lessons, it stops being fun. I'm gonna watch the first 45 minutes of The Devil Wears Prada and be like, what a great movie.
That is the perfect way to watch that film.
Like, I'm not lasting past. Once she makes the Harry Potter books for the girls, I'm out.
Once Meryl Streep starts seeming human, I'm not interested.
No, I'm not interested. I'm not here for that. And like, yeah, Great Gatsby is like poor F. Scott Fitzgerald.
Yeah.
A sentence that people have said all the time.
Which
poor F. Scott Fitzgerald. People just really kind of refusing to admit at the end of the day what this book is about.
Oh,
which
and
is
some entertainment culture tea. That Christina Ricci Zelda Fitzgerald TV show is not good.
yeah, I watched like the first episode and a half and was like, I'm done.
Yeah, it's like somehow both like offensive to my tastes and boring.
Now, did either of you see the Baz Luhrmann Leonardo DiCaprio Great Gatsby?
It was sexy as hell.
I do believe I saw it the day it came out.
Yeah.
Excellent.
I think I was like,
See,
because also too, your girl was really ridiculously madly in love with Tobey Maguire, like my entire teenage years. I mean, he's my Peter Parker forever and always.
That, for
right,
sure.
right.
And Tobey Maguire and Leo DiCaprio, real life BFFs.
Yeah, so they had great chemistry.
So like super cute that they were Jay and Nick. But yeah, like I was so there for that. And I actually really, really liked that adaptation. I thought it was.
I did as well. I feel like when it like critics were releasing their remarks on it, they were like, it feels too like gaudy and like it feels anachronistic and things like those were the main two criticisms I got.
Which I think that like I don't think Fitzgerald. I mean, it's bullshit to kind of like speak for anybody, but I'm like, I don't think he would have given a shit.
No.
Especially about like decadence and like having hot people in his movies and
exactly.
stuff.
Like it I felt was the appropriate sort of fusion of us being like, oh, I can see how this relates to our current culture while also being like clearly a period piece.
Yeah.
Like, and it was overly glossy and like just the right ways I felt to make you be like, this is opulent as fuck.
The Fitzgeralds are like the ultimate self-aware social climbers.
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought they just really nailed it. And you know, I truly think that like Jay-Z playing at a Gatsby party is like, I feel like that is so dead on.
Yeah.
Especially like,
and I think
people I barely know who live that sort of life here. The tone was spot on.
Yeah, I really enjoyed it. I think as far as sorting goes, I don't know. I feel like this one is pretty. I think it's kind of cut and dried. I think Gatsby's a Slytherin. I think the whole book is a Slytherin.
Yeah,
I mean,
it's as Slytherin as they come, but it's like it's kind of delightful in how Slytherin it is.
But in that same way that it kind of encourages people to be shitheads if they're too dumb to get it. It's definitely Slytherin.
Totally.
What do we got next?
Next up, now this is one that I y'all may not have touched, so this might be just like a flash sort. Did y'all read Ethan Frome?
I'm sorry, what?
Ethan Frome?
Ethan Frome.
What is that?
I don't remember who the author was. Ethan Frome. Okay, so this is just a flash sort that I'll do. Okay. Ethan Frome is, it takes place in the, I believe, it's somewhere in New England. It's like Vermont or New Hampshire or something.
Okay, I feel much less bad about being like, what is this?
Yeah, this was, oh man, I'm going to have to look up who wrote this one.
Edith Wharton.
Edith Wharton, that's who it is. Okay, so it's Edith Wharton novel. Ethan's married. It's not great. It's fine, but it's not like awesome. And then I believe his wife's cousin comes to visit. It's like his wife's cousin or his wife's niece or something. And they end up having an affair. Ooh. And at the end, Ethan and the cousin are like, we're going to run away and be together. But what they actually do is get on a sled and intentionally run a sled into a tree so that they can die and be together in the afterlife. But they don't die. They just
oh my God.
they both are injured horribly and become disabled and are then have to be taken care of by Ethan's wife, who is like, you guys tried to leave me here.
Oh my God.
And now they are at her mercy forever.
Between this and like just Chekhov alone, the 1890s to the 1910s seemed very intense for lovers.
Yeah. So I think personally that this book is a Gryffindor because intentionally trying to commit suicide by running a sled into a tree
this
so
is
you can
emo
be with
as all
your
hell.
illicit love is pretty Gryffindor. So shout out to my Wharton heads.
Beautiful. I love it. I'm going to go read that book. It sounds like so good. It sounds so juicy.
My main image and the thing that my class was like obsessed with about this book is that there's a part where like the wife is gone. She's out of town. And so Ethan and the cousin are like essentially playing house for a weekend. They get to pretend that it's their house and that they're married.
Oh
and
my
they
God.
like set the table with this like fancy dinner and there's like a china bowl that has like some gherkins in it. It's like some small pickles in it.
Yeah.
And there's so much description of the pickles. And we were all like, why do these pickles matter so much? So pickles in a bowl,
you know what?
running
I
into
bet
a
it's
tree.
because it's like the same way that like the woman who's like the other woman is like making so much out of this one weekend and like romanticizing it to the point that like we're practically married already.
Yeah. I don't remember too much about it, but it's a wild ride.
I
for sure.
I bet within that class there was at least one couple who got in a fight because the other person said they wouldn't die in a sledding accident for them.
Right, yeah. Like, I'm not going to do that. That sounds like a bad idea.
Yeah, there are a lot more effective ways to
But when you're 17, you need to know that your boy will do that for you.
Yeah.
It came down to it.
Would you put pickles in a plate for me?
I'm very much in the I'll put pickles in a plate for someone. A little more questionable on the die in a sled accident with them.
Well, listen, if you're going to die in a sled accident, make sure you die in the sledding accident.
Right,
yes.
exactly.
Don't make your poor wife have to take care of you.
If you take nothing else from this particular podcast, know that if you're going to die in a sledding accident, actually die in it. Hey, listeners, as a full disclosure, at this point, for whatever odd reason, Galen's recording device decided to stop recording, but we're back.
You know what it is? Mercury's in retrograde.
Shut the fuck.
I think we didn't even record the part where you already there was maybe a part that got lost where Michael already got mad at me for talking about astrology.
No, I think we definitely got that. But
it's true. Also, you can look it up.
It is Mercury's in retrograde. Yes, astrology forever.
Okay, so what is our last thing for junior year? I say, asking Galen as if I don't know what's coming up.
As if we didn't talk about this for 20 minutes before I realized that my recorder stopped working.
Baby,
well,
let's recap.
This would be one of my favorite books that I ever read for required reading, which quickly became my favorite play ever, The Crucible.
Here we go. Arthur Miller.
Arthur Miller, The Crucible.
I'm really good at pretending like I didn't already talk about this.
Reed just made like solid eye contact with me and said it as if they were reading from a script.
As if I knew how to read.
The Crucible.
I've never read a book. Prove that I have.
So give us that sweet plot rundown, Galen.
All right. So The Crucible takes place in Salem, Massachusetts during the Salem witch trials.
Say
because
like a normal person, Galen.
So
this whole like hiccup is making us weird. Okay,
As
go
if we
ahead,
weren't
my darling.
before.
So, The Crucible is about the Salem witch trials, or is it? It's not. It's about the Red Scare.
Mm-hmm.
So, John Proctor is accused of being a witch. So is his wife. So is just about everybody in the town of Salem, Massachusetts, because Abigail Williams and her girlfriends were caught dancing in the woods naked, doing little play pretend magic spells. But in the world of Puritan New England, that ain't going to fly. So everybody starts getting accused of witchcraft. Everybody starts accusing each other of being witches. The whole town goes into a mass panic. People come in, including the Reverend Hale, who is convinced that the devil really is in Salem, and they're going to exorcise the devil from Salem. But actually, this whole thing hinges on Abigail Williams, who used to work at the Proctor's house, had an affair with John Proctor, even though she was a kid. So was it really an affair? She was like 15.
She's 15, right?
There's some questionable stuff.
Yeah, she was like, I think 15 or 16 when she was living at the Proctors as their like essentially just like full-time help, their nanny and cook and whatever. Right. John Proctor seduced her. She fell madly in love with him. And now she's like, I will lie and say whatever I have to get everybody possible out of the way so that John and I can be together.
The way that a child would.
The way a child would. The single-minded focus of a 16-year-old girl who has been scorned. Which, let me tell you, as a former 16-year-old girl,
I don't want to think about being 16. Oh, God. Not a single good decision made with men.
So the Crucible.
Yeah, and then meanwhile, Arthur Miller's writing
so many things
while watching all of his friends in the entertainment industry basically get like nailed down to the board because at this time entertainment was really starting to find its footing in the labor movement, and the unions had started to be formed. We had we had either, was it called Equity back then also? But we definitely had SAG film, and it made all of the studios super worried, and it made it a very convenient way to oust people from the community who were insisting upon equal rights for those who were less fortunate than they were.
People were using their positions of power as like vocal platforms.
And it was powerful people like using this strategically against other powerful people. In the same way that it happens in the Crucible, where it's like, oh, this is not even about Abigail anymore.
and the atmosphere of the play is so tense and overwhelming because by the time Act 2 starts and we're at the first trial, everybody, or I guess Act 3 is the trial, everybody in town is turning on each other. And these trials, of course, are just a total sham where anybody can say, I saw Goody Osborne with the devil. And there's no way to prove that you weren't consorting with the devil. There's no way to prove that you are innocent. So all that you can do is admit your guilt, and then you'll be pardoned. But of course, people don't want to admit their guilt to something they didn't do. So a bunch of the citizens of Salem are killed. And it is this really like gorgeous, poignant allegory for how people turn on each other when they feel their own safety is compromised. And it, specifically when in terms of the Red Scare of the 1950s, people were just getting brought in front of the House Un-American Activities Committee and accused of, and as people were saying, well, you went to a meeting of the Communist Party, therefore you hate America, which we can't draw a straight line between those two things. That doesn't make any sense, obviously.
Yeah, and it's really interesting also because I don't even know if Miller consciously did this because Lord knows his relationship to women was fucked up. But like, it's very interesting, especially to use the issue of female agency, the agency of women, and the agency of like people of color. The fact that like that specifically was what could set the entire town to feeling afraid for their lives, but also feeling like I can take advantage of this fear. Very much the same vein of like the people who are the bourgeoisie saying like, oh, I can see these people who have not had power before realize that they have power when they're all working together. The same way that like the second wave of feminism was when women started being like, oh, we can all just talk to each other and then know when we're being bullshit.
Yeah. And it is, like you mentioned, people of color, the first person really to be accused
and to get the worst treatment about it
is Tituba.
Yeah.
Who Tituba went out into the woods with the girls to do magic spells and stuff because the girls asked her to, because the Puritan girls, and specifically Abigail, wanted her to do what is, I guess, supposed to be the like magic traditions that she brought from her homeland. They ask her to do it, and then she's the first person that gets thrown under the bus.
Yeah, it sucks. And like that happened to people of color within the labor movement too.
Oh,
the Communist Party was virulently racist and sexist. Dorothy Parker writes about it because she was a member of the Communist Party, and she was always talking about how they never took her intelligence seriously, even though she was oftentimes the smartest person in the room.
It's the minute of in hysteria. Unfortunately, the hierarchy, even that you might be fighting against, immediately actually re-solidifies and goes like, no, we're gonna like keep it in the way that it is within our ranks, even though we're trying to disrupt that very thing, and we're going to throw the people at the bottom even farther down the well.
I think it's interesting that Miller set this up as to be an allegory, but to be one that you can immediately identify. He wanted people to know that he was saying something intentional and not to have like really much coyness about it.
Right. Yeah, I'm not sure really how obfuscated it was when it came out. Like, I don't think there was any point. I'm not sure, like, in press releases ahead of it, was he like fully talking to newspapers and being like, this is about McCarthyism? I'm not sure.
I don't think he could have, but I think any smart viewer would just happen to notice.
Yeah.
Like, there are obvious pieces that are meant as commentary that regardless of when they are, you can't help but notice this is oddly aligned with a thing that currently is happening. And that really speaks to like, if the message properly is conveying itself, it will conveniently align with various movements that are currently an issue and oddly similar.
I think maybe I'm assuming that the audiences had the sophistication, because I try not to like, I don't know. I feel like sometimes I ascribe more naivete to older audiences just because. Just
based on like, it was in the past. We were dumber
and also,
then.
and like just assuming that because people weren't necessarily talking about things explicitly, that they weren't thinking about them. And I also try to, I'm like, okay, who's parallel? Who are contemporaries? And what was the complexity of the work they were doing? Like Tennessee Williams was doing a lot of weird dream shit with like the Glass Menagerie and stuff like that. And I think audiences were following along fine. So that's why I assume that it was more obvious, but I could be wrong.
I think also though, like, I mean, it's hard to say because based in like our current contemporary state, there's a lot more that can be outwardly done or like you can work within the framework of how buried or overt do I want my metaphors to be. Whereas if, you're talking directly against a certain large movement, it's probably something that you don't like. He's not going to do an interview and be like, let me just give you the skinny on this.
Right.
So it might have been actually seen as more inventive at the time, but I don't have the documentation to back any of that up.
No, none of us are or I'm not an expert anyway.
And I do think too, to what you were saying about how this play reflects the modern time. Abigail Williams is like a particularly special character to me. She's my number one dream role someday. I made you out of her quickly. So if anybody listening wants to produce the Crucible, let me know. But it is so interesting now to reread this play in the Me Too era, because when I read this story, when I read this play initially in high school 15 years ago, we talked about it purely from the lens of, John had an affair with Abigail.
Yeah, and like how horrible she was to make, like, stir the pot as
she's
hard as she
awful
did.
and she's trying to tear his family apart. But I remember at the time, because I read this when I was 17 and Abigail is 17. Yeah. And I just remember reading it and being like, man, was she done dirty. And of course, now we're in this moment where we're actually interrogating as a culture what it means for adult men to have quote unquote relationships with teenage girls, which is something
we've never really had an open conversation about what it means about the men who are doing it. We always talk about like where the women, the young women, the children are coming from.
And not to mention, I mean, he was her employer.
Yeah.
Like literally when Elizabeth Proctor found out, because all of this happened before the play began, but when Elizabeth Proctor found out that John was having an affair, Abigail lost her job. Abigail got fired. She had to go back and live with her aunt and uncle in a house that it's heavily implied that there is some really untoward stuff happening at Abigail's uncle's house.
Forgive
the
me
Paris
on
household.
This is the affair known to the public?
No, the affair is not known to the public.
That's like one of the linchpins of making of what could make the whole thing fall apart.
Yes,
right?
because Elizabeth tells the first lie she's ever told when she denies that John and Abigail had an affair. Oh, Lizzie, you were just trying to protect your man. Oh, honey.
This is like, did we go back over this about how this is not necessarily a very like historically accurate?
No, we didn't touch on that.
Oh, no, you're right. We didn't talk about that.
I want to get that metaphor back out again. That, like, honestly, because the way you said that, I would love if Ryan Murphy would make an American Crime Story Salem.
Oh my gosh, yes.
Because this play, honey, if you've not read it before and you liked like the assassination of Gianni Versace, go read this play. It reads very much like it. It's very melodramatic. The characters sometimes aren't necessarily even playing the roles that they actually were in history.
Yeah, and I think historically, Abigail was actually like 14 or 15 years old, and there's no historical evidence that shows that she had an affair with anybody.
It made it sexier, which is what Ryan Murphy does.
there's not much historical evidence that the girls were just like straight up lying and trying to get their neighbors killed.
Yeah, and so there is actually some claims that they could have been witches.
Yeah, it was probably something like rotten bread that was giving people hallucinations. Whoops.
And then as far as the sorting goes...
Well, when I think of this play, the culmination of all the action at the end of Act 4, it ends with John Proctor refusing to sign a confession that he consorted with the devil and shouting in his jail cell, "It is my name. I cannot have another in my life." And decides that he is going to he's going to face the death penalty. He's going to die because he cannot destroy his good name and his family's good name forever for a lie. And that is, I think, pretty Gryffindor.
Yeah.
But my husband did say that he thinks that might not be the distillation of the entire book, that is maybe more just about like John Proctor himself as a Gryffindor.
Yeah.
Which
but
I am open to.
Okay, this also might be me just being like too much of like a misandrist at this point, but I'm also like, yeah, he's saying it's all about his name, but also he's scared and doesn't want to get in trouble. And a lot of men who are called out in the Me Too movement use the excuse of like, I didn't want to do this to my family by coming out and telling the truth.
Well, sure. I mean, when you say like my name, it's both like the name of my family, but also like it's me.
Yeah,
like
it's my ego.
It is actually my name.
Which I would be like, ultimately, I think it is a Ravenclaw / sort of Gryffindor thing, but his whole intentions, I feel, are super Slytherin.
Well, I think that it's a Ravenclaw in the basis of like, one, it's metaphor allegory like around all of this, but also the sort of discussion around like the ethics and the logic that like people are using to like circumvent some of the stuff. I feel is very Ravenclaw.
I would agree.
Yeah, it's the play is really in its entirety a metaphor, and that does feel very Ravenclaw. That the entire play is yes, you can take it at face value as this incredible story of power and hysteria and, misplaced zeal. But also it was written specifically as a metaphor and as a critique, which, that just feels like a Ravenclaw thing.
All right. So that was junior year. We are running long.
Junior year
yes,
was
we
packed,
ran,
you guys.
We ran an hour for freshman and sophomore. We're a little under an hour, but I expect senior year will be long. So Galen, will you come back for part 3?
God,
Okay.
it's almost time is dilating the way it did when I was actually in high school. By the time I get to our senior year episode, I'll probably be getting up out of my seat constantly.
Guys, I'm sorry. This is what happens when I start talking about books. It goes
All right,
long.
Galen, if we want to be finding more of you online, where would we go?
You can find me at Galen Crawley on both Instagram and Twitter.
Great. You can follow Reed and myself on Twitter, That Dang Dingus, and Belated Media, respectively. Leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. Follow us at sortinghat_pod.
Find us on Goodreads. It won't be me, but...
All right. Bye, all.
See you soon.